If you didn't believe it before, I hope you believe it now. Notre Dame can win it all.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel NFL Playoffs. They're almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Boy, Notre Dame's playing good football. Really good national championship kind of football, just not in the way that we're all accustomed to. Jalen Milroe is going to the NFL draft, and are we still firing Ryan Day? I don't know. You tell me. Probably not. So let's start with the Fighting Irish. So they beat Georgia 23-10. I picked Notre Dame to win and therefore cover going into this game. They were plus 1.5. There was a late switch in the line. They were minus 1.5. It was going back and forth, and whoever had the late money to come in and bet on Notre Dame knew what they were talking about, or maybe they just listened to the show. I don't know. I mean, just throwing it out there as a potential idea. So my confidence in Notre Dame was rooted in the rushing attack. I felt that Notre Dame had been more consistent on the ground, and going into the final few games, the team that outrushes the other had been 5-0. Well, here we are with the semifinals all set. You've got Ohio State, Texas on one side, Notre Dame, Penn State on the other after Notre Dame beat Georgia. And in the 8 games we have seen so far, the team that runs for more yards, 7-1. The one team that lost, Arizona State. You make whatever you want of that targeting call. I thought it was targeting, but newsflash, the officials weren't good the entire game. Wow, where have I seen that before in college football? But all season long. So Notre Dame wins this game, and it doesn't look the way that you want a national championship team to look in your head, but you need to just accept it for what it is. I have been singing this tune for several weeks now here on the show, dating back to the final 4, 5, 6 weeks of the regular season. And you look back now, and I know it's a team from the G5, but Army finished the season with 12 wins. I don't care which conference you're in. There are only a handful of teams that did that. Army is good. They were one of the best group of 5 teams in all of college football this year. They lost to Navy, by the way. Notre Dame blasted them into oblivion. You know what they did it with? Special teams, defense, run game. Not always in that order, but sometimes in that order. It's the defense first, and I'd put the special teams before I would put the offense. I mean, Notre Dame scored 23 points in this game. They didn't have a bunch of long and sustained drives. They had a kick return touchdown. They stripped Gunnar Stockton at the end of the half and get a quick strike on the only touchdown pass of the game for Riley Leonard. He had 90 yards passing, and Notre Dame was able to kneel out the clock by the end of it. This Notre Dame team does not look or feel even like past national championship teams. You think of the great ones that have won in the last decade. 2019 LSU, best college football team I've ever seen in my lifetime. That's Joe Burrow with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Yeah, no surprise those guys were good. Terrence Marshall wasn't a slouch, by the way. He was their number 3 receiver, throwing it all over the field. Devontae Smith, the next year for Alabama in the COVID season, won the Heisman Trophy as a wide receiver. Well, how about that? They had a great offense. They go on to win the national championship. Georgia's defense, completely dominant. And Stetson Bennett, a Heisman Trophy finalist, whether you remember him that way or not. But Notre Dame just wins. They just win. There's no real consistent identity. Their defense is really good. But when I watch them, I don't feel like they're reliant on one part of the defense. The secondary can make plays. The linebackers have had impact moments. You saw the defensive line get the strip sack and fumble recovery that led to an easy touchdown. 2 of Notre Dame's touchdowns required less than 10 yards of offense. How about that? Because a kick return from your special teams guy, that's not offense. That's just kick return yardage. And then you have a short field set up by the defense. That's the way that they are doing this. They just find ways to win. They are the Major League Baseball wild card team that doesn't have the most explosive offense, has got a good pitching staff, but it's not what you would consider to be the best staff in all of baseball. And certainly, if you have the best staff in all of baseball, you're in the playoffs, right? Yeah. Anyway, so that's a very niche reference, but at least one person out there is going to understand that. I hope more in the Pacific Northwest. But Notre Dame is just a winning football team. The final score of this game was 23-10. They had a 20-3 lead. By the way, where is the SEC superiority crowd at? I've been in your camp for a long time. I hopped out of it when I saw the product everyone was putting on the field this year. The data points just keep piling in time and time and time again. The second best team in the SEC, Texas, almost lost to the Big 12 champion. Should have lost in the eyes of Sun Devil fans. I mean, a 4th and 13, what a play by Quinn Ewers, who I was certainly down on a segment earlier this week on the show. I stand by everything I said there. Quinn has a very high ceiling. Quinn has a very low floor. He had a high ceiling in that moment. Reads the zero blitz, switches to max protection, puts the ball on the money to his best wide receiver. It was the epitome of why Texas went with Quinn Ewers again instead of Arch Manning. I don't know that Arch Manning gets all of those tiny little details right. Quinn Ewers did in that moment. So Texas scrapes by in an incredible game. The best we have seen of the 12-team playoff so far. And I don't know that it's particularly close. Georgia has a backup quarterback who appears competent at times, but they have no ability to move the football. Can Georgia get some wide receivers? This is just bizarre. This has been the worst pass-catching season I have seen from any SEC team ever. I bet you could find Vanderbilt teams from the 2-10, 1-11 days that had more consistent pass catching than what Georgia's had this season. It has been unlike anything I've seen. Got to be the top priority in the transfer portal or from the development side for Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs now that they enter the offseason here. But they lose to Notre Dame on a neutral site by more points than Indiana lost to Notre Dame on the road with the elements and the home crowd. The SEC hypotheticals crowd, they've had to take a back seat. They were very loud. Indiana was the first team through the wall. And eventually we just continued to realize, hey, a lot of these playoff games end up double-digit margins at the end of the day. And it doesn't mean the team shouldn't have been there. Most deserving over who we think is best. Because now, more than ever in college football, based on this season, it's abundantly clear. It's just one season of data. I'll grant you that. The SEC didn't win the championship last year either, but they still could this year. Texas is alive. They've got Ohio State, who looks incredibly tough to beat. But it is far tougher to discern what would play out on the field because of what we think we know in our minds. That has continued to become evident throughout the year. The SEC in hypotheticals, well, they don't lose those very often. But the SEC on the field loses plenty, and they were almost completely eliminated from the playoff, if not for a 4th and 13 stroke of brilliance by Quinn Ewers. So, Notre Dame's really good. They're not going to go down if they win this whole thing as one of the best teams to ever win the college football playoff or to win a national championship. But I tell you what, of the 4 teams that are left, they can emerge as the top dog in the race. No questions asked. They just win. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter. So, switching to the offseason for a moment. Could Alabama benefit from losing Jalen Milroe? Yes, they could. We'll tell you why next. First, a reminder of this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It can be as simple as, picking the favorites in the college football playoff. That's apparently all you have to do. I mean, Notre Dame closes the favorite in that game against Georgia. The favorites, they're rolling. They're rolling. They're hot. If you think that'll continue in the semifinals, by all means. If that's your first bet and it hits and it's $5, you get $250 in bonus bets just like that. You can also bet on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Alabama needs a new quarterback. Jalen Milroe declares for the 2025 NFL Draft. That raises a lot of questions. Let's try and answer some of them with Luke Robinson, Locked On Alabama, friend of the program, joining me here. So, Luke, where is Alabama turning here with Jalen Milroe gone to the draft? Because it seems like it's a collection of maybe, possibly, this guy could be good, that guy, but there's no proven commodity on that roster, right?
Well, there's no proven commodity. I mean, Ty Simpson has played some, and when he has played, it hadn't been fantastic, but he hadn't been set up to do fantastically either. When Ty Simpson has played, he's usually been because Alabama's beaten somebody so badly that he just comes in and hands the ball off. One time he came in pretty early during a blowout, and he took off for about a 79-yard run, and he dropped the ball before he got to the end zone, which, it's just something people do that I'll never understand.
I can't understand it. How are we still doing that, man?
I don't get it. I don't know what the prize is for that. Like if there was some kind of extra point for doing it, like if you do it right before you cross it, the way some people do.
Yeah, if you drop it in between the goal line and the 1 yard line, you get an extra point for your team. I just thought Deshaun Jackson had scared us all away, but I guess not.
No, and there's something. It's almost like, look how important this thing is to me. It's so important to me, I can drop it before I even get in there. It makes no sense.
That's wild.
We could do a whole podcast on that.
We could,
but I still have some faith in Ty Simpson. He's a former 5-star. Keelan Russell's coming in. I love me some Keelan Russell. Now, today in the Under Armour All-American game, he got banged up a little bit. He could have apparently gone back in, but I think smarter heads prevailed, and he decided, okay, you know what? I don't really need to go back in. So he didn't go back in, which I think is a positive. He'll be reporting to Alabama pretty shortly. He'll be involved with that spring battle. All the folks that were at the Under Armour practices say, look, he's probably the best quarterback there. He looked great. And then, of course, there's also Austin Mack, who's 6'13", just a domineering type dude. He's very tall, and I think he is legitimately 6'8". He puts that helmet on, and he just looks like he towers above everybody.
Brock Osweiler vibes.
Yeah, and he threw a nice touchdown pass to Rico Scott against Mercer. I know it's against Mercer, I know, but we don't get a chance to see the third teamer play a lot. So I got to see him play, and point being, I don't think Alabama is devoid of talent. I think they've got some dudes back there, all unproven. I'm not going to – if this were Nick Saban circa 2015, I'd say I'm not worried about it. The defense is going to hold steady until whoever's going to be the quarterback starts to shine. Now it's Kalen DeBoer circa 2025, and I'm sort of like, I don't really know what to tell you guys. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Ty Simpson or Keelan Russell or Austin Mack is going to be an All-American or an All-SEC or even the starter for the whole year. I don't really know I'm going to be watching the spring game just like everybody else.
So what I was thinking about before we hopped on to record here is over the course of the season, I saw two different types of Jalen Milroe. I saw the guy who was
Only
hitting...
two?
was hitting on the deep shots early in the season. Alabama's ranked number 1 in the country. Ryan Williams is the best wide receiver as a freshman we've ever seen. That's definitely Jeremiah Smith now. Holy moly, is that guy a football?
He's ridiculous.
He's absurd. But so too is Ryan Williams, and it felt like that connection faded as the year went on. And Jalen Milroe faded as the year went on. And I think from a quarterback production standpoint, Luke, I feel like Jalen Milroe is a bigger loss as a name than it is from an actual production capability. Because one thing that you and I talked about coming into the season that I was really wondering about was, Milroe's a runner. He's a mobile guy. DeBoer likes pocket guys. Penix sat there from the pocket. Jake Haener was a pocket guy. And Penix again at Indiana. Those were pocket quarterbacks. And Milroe isn't that sort of guy. It looked like they'd figure it out. But then it just ceased to mesh. Am I crazy for thinking that at least by the end of next year, maybe not at the start, because someone's going to be getting reps early in the season in big games for the first time ever, by the end of next season, Alabama could be better off the quarterback position?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. And I think all the fans, most of the fans at least, would tell you right now that they are happy that Jalen is gone. They're happy for Jalen. I don't think there's anybody that truly dislikes Jalen. There's some people right now with a bad taste in their mouth from Jalen from these last few weeks. I mean, even the LSU game, he didn't throw a touchdown pass. I mean, he ran all over them. I mean, he threw a touchdown pass against Michigan, but it was to Robbie Oots, just like I think he threw in against Mercer to Robbie Oots. I mean, you got Ryan Williams on your team. How do you not get him touchdowns? I mean, it's kind of crazy. And look, nobody's been a bigger Milroe sunshine pumper than me. I've been on the Milroe hype train, and after Georgia, I thought clearly he was the Heisman front runner. It wasn't just me. The world thought that.
I had him as my Heisman pick before the season.
Yeah, and then, of course, the Vanderbilt game comes around, and, that game got sideways kind of early, but, they still scored 35 points in that game. I think they lost 40-35. And so you're like, okay, well, that was a defensive issue. But then the Tennessee game comes around, or even really the South Carolina game. And, Milroe does some things that put South Carolina back in the game if he had connected on a deep pass to Ryan Williams, which was wide open, I think that game gets out of hand for South Carolina. Instead, it gave South Carolina some life. They come back and, Milroe gets the safety and an interception and some other things. And meanwhile, Lenora Sellers is looking like what we want Jalen Milroe to look like. And all that stuff's happening simultaneously. And then the Tennessee game, Milroe throws a really bad pick. Alabama has 3 turnovers, I think, in the first half against Tennessee, and they can't really capitalize on them. I mean, and it just seemed like Milroe was beginning to get out of sorts. And then it just seemed to get worse and worse. The LSU game was fool's gold. I mean, we thought all is well. Well, we just didn't we didn't pass the ball very well still. And then you go to even Auburn. I mean, all Milroe's touchdowns were running touchdowns. We scored 28 points against Auburn. They were all 4 rushes. 3 touchdowns for Milroe, 1 for Justice Haynes. And, Milroe is an incredible ambassador for the program. I've been saying that all along. And I've been saying it to the point where after this game against Michigan, people were like, I don't want to hear he's a great ambassador to the program anymore. But that's still true. He's still a good dude. He does wear his heart on his sleeve. It's very clear. His body language tells you everything. I mean, he's, I'm a talk with my hands guy. If I'm not talking at you with my hands, you probably know I'm disinterested in whatever it is we're talking about. So, yeah. Or like moving towards you. I mean, body language does mean a lot sometimes. And it's good for a quarterback to, I think, be vocal. It's also good for a quarterback to have an even keel, because if you get 2 up when you're up, you're probably going to get 2 down when you're down. And I think Milroe did that too. I really like him. Met his father, super guy, just like him. And I want it to work out at the next level. I hope he goes gets drafted to a place that is going to be very patient with him and try to teach him some things. I want it to, because here's another thing. He is a Gump. He loves him some Alabama.
The Ravens.
The Ravens would be nice. I'd love for him to go learn under. Can you imagine a backfield that has Lamar Jackson, Jalen Milroe as a backup, and Derrick Henry? Just put all 3 of them back there and say, try and tackle him.
Yeah.
Because actually that's a good mix. I think Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, if they had a kid, it'd be very weird. But if they had a kid, it'd be Jalen Milroe. Because that's the other thing. We talk about Jalen Milroe and everybody talks about his straightaway speed. But what I guess we never really took into consideration, or at least a lot of us, we just glossed over the fact, maybe laterally it's not great, because he's been sacked a lot. Now this year it was cut way down, but in the Michigan game, they sacked him a lot.
Yeah. So real quick before I get you out of here, Luke, Keelan Russell, Austin Mack, Ty Simpson, your confidence level that one of those guys can get Alabama to the playoff?
Oh, my confidence level is 60%. I'm not so much worried about the quarterback. I'm worried about the schedule. At South Carolina, doesn't look easy. At FSU, Wisconsin at home, at Georgia, LSU at home with Nussmeier and Harold Perkins coming back, and they'll have some good receivers. The schedule at Auburn is going to be difficult next year because it always is when you go to that, that haunted place Nick Saban talks about.
Yep.
At least for us. Alabama's got a tough row to hoe next year. And I memean, you could put a lot of people back there at quarterback, and 9-3 would still be pretty good. I'll probably be a homer and predict 10-2 or something. But 9-3 is probably looking pretty good next year for that. So I'm going to say 60% level confidence.
Luke Robinson, Locked On Alabama. Great as always, Luke. Appreciate the time.
All right. Appreciate you, Spencer.
Let's fire Ryan Day, shall we? That's coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by Rocket Money. So, Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions you're paying for twice and help you cancel that. That's just one way they're helping you improve your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place. I don't think that's great in realignment. I do think it's great for your finances, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. What would you do with $740? I have an idea of what I would do, but everyone's different. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So are we still firing Ryan Day? Is that something we're doing? Because I heard that a lot. Day's got to go. Ryan Day can't do this. He can't do that. Really? That was your take. He was something like 49-1 against Big Ten teams not named Michigan, and that one loss was by 1 point to the number one team in the country, who he just blasted into another galaxy in the Rose Bowl earlier this week. That was the one loss, and people want to run him out of town. Okay. Yeah. I agree with Nick Saban here. Rivalries are what make college football great, but the psychology between Ohio State and Michigan, it's different, and Ohio State's got to figure it out. But guess what? That's more a message for the fans, because the team has figured it out. So perhaps infamously at this point, given my college football fandom, I picked Tennessee to upset Ohio State. I didn't think you'd have straight chalk in the first round, but you did. The chalk has continued over and over again, and I kind of think it will going into the next round. We'll just see. But Ohio State looks darn near unstoppable. Jeremiah Smith is unstoppable. He doesn't look unstoppable. He just is unstoppable. So when Ohio State lost to Michigan, I thought that was going to hang around the locker room. I was worried for the Buckeyes' sake that it was going to be in their heads that, hey, we're playing this game. Oh, man, we didn't beat Michigan. Oh, man. Ryan Day has taken that card that I put down, and he has hit me with the Uno reverse. He has slapped me in the face with it, because the next two teams, who I don't think were bad, by the way, or overrated, or frauds, Ohio State is just capable of being that good. Tennessee and Oregon, who went a combined 23-2 this year. Ryan Day beat them 83-38. Had a 34-0 lead over a team that beat them earlier this season. Now, beating a team in the same season twice is really hard. Ryan Day showed you why it's hard to beat a great team with a great coaching staff twice in a season. Because that was one of the most impressive coaching performances I have seen this year in college football. It might be the most impressive, which is incredible because the Michigan game was the worst coaching performance that I saw in college football this year. And yet, in a 3-game stretch, the same staff with the same players produced those two ends of the spectrum. This is why college football is played on the field, not on paper, because you can't possibly explain how you go and just blast a team that beat you earlier this year, who hasn't lost to anyone and has 3 wins against college football playoff teams. You can't explain that other than it's great coaching. Ryan Day outcoached Dan Lanning, and Chip Kelly outcoached Tosh Lupoi, Oregon's defensive coordinator, and Jim Knowles, the Ohio State defensive coordinator, he outcoached Will Stein, Oregon's offensive coordinator. The talent gap, they got plenty of discussion after that game took place. You can make an argument Ohio State has a better roster. Fine. But I watched those 2 rosters go toe-to-toe, and Oregon was the better team on October 12th. They didn't just win the game. They won the game whilst making a myriad of self-inflicted mistakes and critical moments that didn't go their way. Now, certainly there were parts of that game that didn't go Ohio State's way, but Oregon was the better team that day. And for Ryan Day to not just turn around, make the adjustments from that game and win, but to have a 34-0 lead, that's unconscionable. People like myself, a lot of people rightly thought that this game was going to be tight, was going to be close, was going to be kind of a repeat of what we saw the first time, and it wasn't. And it all came down to coaching. The game plan from Chip Kelly and the offense was perfect. And the game plan from Jim Knowles and the defense was flawlessly executed. You pair great coaching with great players, this is the result. And Ohio State from here on out, I'm not picking against them. Not when they play like that. Tennessee is someone who I talked about frequently on the show as, boy, they're flying under the radar here. And you know what? Tennessee's defense, really good. Oregon's defense this year, really good. Didn't matter. They both gave up 40+. Will Howard is playing closer to a first-round draft pick than I've ever seen before. I don't know that he's going to be. I'm just saying there's no way he doesn't make an NFL roster if he can make throws like this. The Jeremiah Smith is incredible, but the play that stood out the most to me from that Rose Bowl game wasn't something Jeremiah Smith did. It was the seam shot for the second touchdown that Will Howard made to Emeka Egbuka, who's a really good receiver. But the corner, Brandon Johnson, is in good position underneath. He actually gets a hand on the ball, and Egbuka has the concentration and strength to haul it in anyway. But that throw was emblematic of how specific and phenomenal Will Howard has been over the last couple of games. So since the Michigan game, which was the worst coaching performance of the year for anybody in college football, even worse than Alabama's defensive staff against Vanderbilt. That's a 7-win Vanderbilt team. That's far more respect. I know Michigan ends up winning 8 games because they beat Alabama in the bowl game, but Ohio State was at home. Bama was on the road. Bama was on the road, and Kane Womack couldn't figure it out on the defensive staff. Ryan Day and Chip Kelly were at home, and they couldn't figure out, we have an alien on the outside with 2 other NFL receivers. Maybe we should throw them the ball when Michigan's first-round corner isn't playing in the game. The fact that they couldn't, pretty inexplicable. Especially when you watch the last 2 games where they're just making a concerted effort. They look more like 2019 LSU or last year's Washington team than any other team in college football has. They're going, so we've got NFL receivers and we've got a good quarterback. Why don't we, throw it down the field? Dial up some deep shots? Ohio State put on a coaching masterclass. They watched the Big Ten championship game film, and they saw what Oregon struggled with against Penn State. Tempo, motions, formation shifts. It caused communication issues on the back end. Oregon didn't clean those things up. And Dan Lanning and his staff, they've got to be better than that. They absolutely do. I think Lanning can be better than that in the future. But on that day, they weren't. They didn't have the adjustments. We can talk about the rest versus rust factor. Certainly felt like rust was far more in play than anything else for the teams that had the bye given the long layoff. But I don't know that it would have mattered because Tennessee, they didn't have a month-long layoff between their final game and when they went and played Ohio State. It was a longer layoff, but Ohio State has figured out what works. And surprise, surprise, it's playing to their strength. For those of you who are in the camp of, why do we focus on recruiting? Stars don't matter. Blah-de-dee, blah-de-dee, blah. Lots of receivers and rankings out there. Jeremiah Smith was a 5-star plus wideout. That's what it looks like. That's not normal. He's going to be in college football for 2 years after this one. I think he'll get drafted pretty high one day. Just a thought. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.